This video is brought to you by Squarespace, an all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. Hello, my beautiful doves. My name is Mina, and today we're going to be talking about the Oscars, the Academy Awards, Best Costume Design category. So I thought this could be a fun little thing that we do maybe annually if enough people like it. If I'm the only one who likes it, I guess that's fine. But yeah, I thought this could be a fun thing where we just talk about all the nominees and discuss the production notes. And I'll say my opinions on each of the movies just for fun. Obviously, you can come to your own conclusion on which movie you think should win. I'm recording this before the Oscars actually happens, but I'm going to include my reaction to the winner here.
And the Oscar goes to Black Panther, Wakanda.
Okay, deserved. I have really nothing to say because I think she really deserves it. You'll just have to see what I say about it when I get there, but I'm not surprised and I'm really happy for her. And yeah. So there's a lot to discuss. There are 5 nominees. In alphabetical order, we'll be tackling them. So Babylon, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Elvis, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris. So first, a word from our sponsor. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring this video. If you don't know where to start, Squarespace has a bunch of website templates, and if none of them match your vibe, you can still add customizations like different fonts, colors, and images until you find something that works for you. To aid you in growing your business, Squarespace offers plenty of analytic breakdowns. You can see who's checking you out and for how long they're spending on your page, where they're based, and also analytics that have to deal with commerce if you're selling things. Speaking of selling things, yes, you can set up a store on your website where you can market all kinds of things from physical products, digital downloads, to even subscriptions and memberships. Check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/MinaLai to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. Babylon is a 3-hour-long epic retelling of the Hollywood film industry from its beginning, starting in 1926, and ending in the early 30s. The characters are mostly fictionalized, though based on actual stars. For instance, Nellie Leroy is heavily based on Clara Bow, and Jack Conrad is a representation of John Gilbert. So I have the most to say about Babylon because I feel like this movie was made for me as the intended audience, dare I say. I love Hollywood. I love 1920s, 1930s, pre-code Hollywood. So I was really excited to see what was going to happen here. I also do really like Damien Chazelle. Like, I loved Whiplash. I liked La La Land. I don't know. I have a love-hate relationship with La La Land because I found it very aesthetically pleasing and I liked the soundtrack, though I think the story kind of irked me. Ryan Gosling's character in particular was very annoying, but I could appreciate it for what it was. Moonlight still deserved the best Oscar for that year, but
there's a mistake. Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture.
Moonlight won. Come on, this is not a joke. This is not a joke. I'm afraid they read the wrong thing.
Moonlight, Best Picture.
Yeah, needless to say, I was excited going into it. My impression after watching the movie is that I was kind of dissatisfied. I feel that Damien Chazelle was trying to cram in so many ideas and so many cultural things that were happening between like 1926, I think is when the movie starts, to the end of the 1930s. And because of that, no one idea was really given any proper introspection. And so, yeah, I guess like leaving the theater, I felt very dissatisfied. I felt like there wasn't a lot of depth to the movie, and I didn't feel personally connected to any of the characters. I thought the movie was also just very gross. Like, I had heard about the infamous elephant defecation scene that happens within the first 5 minutes of the movie prior to watching it. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like, there's just, defecation, urination, vomiting, farting. There's this one really creepy scene with Tobey Maguire that I honestly, I didn't even watch in full because it distressed me so much. So yeah, there were a lot of just very gross things that were happening in the movie that I didn't expect and that I wasn't prepared for. So if you're planning to watch it, be forewarned. In saying that, there were still some scenes that I actually really enjoyed watching. I liked the scene when they start exploring with sound. I love the chaos behind that.
Hello, college!
And I also liked the chaos in the opening scene at the big Hollywood party quite a lot. I think the major thing tying me to this movie is once again my love of Hollywood movies and particularly pre-code Hollywood, so it was impossible for me not to find some spark of joy while watching it, but I don't know if anyone uninterested in Hollywood would sit through the full 3 hours. But let's talk about the costumes. So the costume designer for the film was Mary Zophres. She's been nominated for the Academy Award for Best Costume Design 4 times now, known for frequently collaborating with Damien Chazelle on La La Land and First Man, and her other projects include True Grit, Hail Caesar, and The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. So just a couple of production notes. The costume department created around 7,000 costumes, and most of the pieces were handmade. So just some cool costuming things that they did. Zophres did research into what costumes designers of that era did, because there are a lot of like movie costumes within the movie. Movie costume inception. So to do her research, there aren't a lot of surviving materials left behind by these historical costume designers. So she actually watched a bunch of silent movies and paused them at certain parts to figure out how costumes back in the 20s were constructed. For example, by freeze framing the silent version of Robin Hood, she deduced that an open weave knit coated with metallic paint stood in for chainmail, and she copied that technique. Crew members also dug up samples from Peru, the location of the silent movie studio, and the Big Sky movie ranch in Simi Valley, and then custom mix theatrical dirt to distress and age costumes with a perfect match. So there are a lot of cool things, no doubt, happening with the costume design process, but I think we do need to address the elephant in the room, no pun intended.
What the fuck?
Why does Margot Robbie look like this? Or let's actually backtrack. Why does this movie not look like the 1920s? So I read the Zophres interview with Vogue Scandinavia where she says, I break the script down. I do an intense amount of research, that's reading diaries, watching every 20s film I can get my hands on, and reading all the books that Damien told me to read. So when I was reading this, I was like, so if you did so much research, why are there no drop waist? Why is there no bobbed hair? Why are there no cloche hats? Well, then I read a little bit more, and apparently Damien Chazelle did not want to make a standard period piece. He apparently wanted to avoid all 1920s tropes. Zophres goes on to say, I had this direction from Damien to avoid your typical drop waist dress with a bob. If we could find something that you couldn't automatically identify as 20s but was from the 20s, oftentimes that became an inspiration. Oh my God. I don't understand why Damien Chazelle was trying to work around these period signifiers of style when making essentially a period film. Like, I know he didn't want it to seem like a standard one, but you're still telling the story that's set in the 1920s and 30s. So how are we, the audience, supposed to understand that if Margot Robbie has like a perm? In the 1920s, women bobbed their hair. Louise Brooks was a major fashion icon, and people copied her in the same way that people copied the Kardashians now. I mean, would you say that the Anastasia dip brow trend was a cliche of the 2010s? Like, girls all over the world participated, so why are we not representing this style? It's giving Joe Wright refusing to do higher waistlines in Pride and Prejudice. Like, I just don't get it. If you want to do a 70s aesthetic, then just do a 70s film. Anyways, so I think the men are actually fine. Menswear changes so little in comparison to women's wear across the 20th century. And so like little inconsistent details here and there are not too egregious. Also, in this film, they mostly outsourced the men's clothing from tailors, and these suits were constructed with period details in mind and the period correct weight of fabric, which is a 14-ounce wool. I actually really liked Jack Conrad's off-duty sportswear outfits because sportswear was becoming very popular in the 1920s. As I said earlier, Jack is based on actor John Gilbert, and there are several surviving photos of Gilbert rocking similar outfits. Manny Torres's looks were cool too. He wears a borrowed tuxedo jacket with a bow tie that's too small when he's first breaking into Hollywood, and then later on when he becomes an executive, he wears suits that are actually tailored to fit him. But for the women, and specifically Margot Robbie's character, Nellie Leroy, it's just like a disaster. And it's not even the costumes that annoy me, it's the hair and makeup. Hairstylist for the film, Jamie Lee McIntosh, said, "When you think of the 20s, it's the bob and finger waves, but Chazelle wanted to stay away from the cliches." If a character had a bob, it would be a little worn. There was frizz and fluff. Robbie was our wild child, and I had Robert Plant in mind with her. The texture and the bigness and the rock and roll of it. When you see her dancing, her hair is flying around and whipping. I worked closely with wig maker Robert Pickens to create the fluff, the lightness. And the film's makeup artist, Heba Thorsdottir, said, "Chazelle didn't want the 20s skinny eyebrows and little bow lips. In party scenes, Margot had the Studio 54 look as if it happened in the 20s. Character-wise, she didn't know how to do makeup, but she might have lipstick." So this doesn't make sense for a number of reasons, but especially because Sophie's justified her choice to dress Nellie Leroy in this red skimpy scarf dress look with the reasoning that Nellie was a dancer in New York City before she moved to LA. Sophie says, "My thought was that it was something that she could have cobbled together, made herself. She could have taken the needle and thread and been like, okay, I want this to be like this, standing in front of her mirror. She knows she's making this entrance and this is her chance to get discovered. Your eye is drawn to her by what she's wearing and then also the person who is wearing it." The reference for the scarf look was Anna May Wong. There are a few photos you can find online of her wearing a scarf that she had wrapped around herself. Clara Bow was also cited, particularly her looks when she was a dancer and would wear tap shorts under her skirts. Okay, I'll give like a soft pass to the scarf look, right? But if Nellie was a dancer, why would she not know how to do her hair and makeup? Something's not adding up here. And besides, a dancer would not wear her onstage clothing off stage. The Anna May Wong photographs, I couldn't find any particular caption that explains what's happening, but I assume they were taken during her dancing career because she did join a vaudeville circuit for a minute. There were different societal rules that existed in the theater that would get you arrested if you were in the public space. Sometimes you could even get arrested in the theater. Gertrude Hoffman was famously arrested during her performance of Salome in 1908, where she was wearing something very scanty. I mean, looking at these photos now, they're not very scanty compared to what most people will wear on Halloween. But for the time period, it was a no-go. And yeah, she was like put in jail for a bit. This other outfit she wears while filming is also a modernized version of what Clara Bow wore in the movie The Wild Party. Nellie's skirt is way too short for the period, women still cover their knees when out and about, and she's not wearing a brassiere. This is not Nellie's like own personal style coming through because she's literally wearing a movie costume, like she's on set for a movie. So there's not really an excuse as to why her skirt is super short and why she's not wearing a bra and why her hair and makeup look like this still. Like, there's no way the movie's hair and makeup team wouldn't do something about her face. No offense. Hollywood was very controlling about how their actresses looked, and those eyebrows would have been plucked to the gods, and that hair would also be cut short or at least styled better. And speaking of Anna May Wong, the best character in the film, Lady Fei Zhu, is clearly based on her and Marlene Dietrich. She's actually a performer and comes to these parties to perform, so there's much more leeway with her costumes. Eleanor St. John, I think they did a good job with her because she is the most 1920s looking of the bunch. And I love that for her. I love seeing an older woman be at the forefront of fashion because that's so rare in period pieces, especially. They usually try to dress older women 10 years behind everyone else, but she looks really good. But not good enough to save this movie's costume design. I really just can't get over the anachronistic styling of the main girl and also Damien Chazelle's like aversion to 1920s aesthetics for a 1920s film. I also just noticed like it's always the main girl who looks anachronistic in a period film because they're trying to appeal to like modern tastes. I just feel like we're at a point now where when I see a protagonist or any character that looks so anachronistic, it really just makes the production feel cheap, or it makes it seem like they're not taking themselves seriously. And especially when portraying a story that's so like untold, there's just not a lot of media about pre-code Hollywood and what it was really like. And I think to really drive home the idea that the 1920s and 1930s is not as glamorous or is not as romanticized as we in the popular consciousness think today, it would have helped by still allowing them to dress the way that they dressed. Because yes, it is possible to dress in a more conservative way and still be doing all these like heinous behaviors, you know? That would have just been really cool to see. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever is the sequel to Marvel's 2018 Black Panther. In the film, the unexpected death of King T'Challa and the discovery of vibranium on the ocean floor forces his sister Shuri to take the mantle of Black Panther in his place to save Wakanda from an underwater mind kingdom and its powerful ruler, Namor. Now, I'm not a Marvel Universe girly. I feel very Martin Scorsese about superhero media, except for X-Men, because I grew up with that, and I loved it as a child, so it's more of like a nostalgia thing for me. But in general, I'm just not really into franchises. So with that said, I don't really want to do like a review of this film in that way, because I understand like I'm not the intended audience. And that's fine. I'm not always going to be the intended audience. And there are people who love this category of movie. And that's great for them. I did watch it though, because research. And I will say I did really enjoy the underwater sequences. And I also thought it was cool how they took this like old school comic book character, Namor. I don't know how they originally pronounced this name, but I looked him up and he's been a comic book super mutant hero person thing since like the 1930s. So it was cool that they rewrote his story so that instead of just being from like this generic Atlantis, which we've seen a million times, he was from a Mayan civilization, which is something that we've never seen before. The costume designer for the film was Ruth E. Carter, who also worked on the original Black Panther, where she won the Academy Award for Best Costume Design. Also, might I add, the first Black person to win an Academy Award for costume design. She's also worked on a number of other movies, including Malcolm X and Amistad, which also were nominated for Oscars. For the first Black Panther film, she studied a lot of different African tribes and took what she found to create the world of Wakanda. So let's take a look at the costume, in which there were 2,100 for this film. Chadwick Boseman unfortunately passed away a few years ago, and they did address that in the film with the death of his character, King T'Challa. There is a funeral procession scene where everyone is wearing white. In Western culture, it's mostly common to wear black at funerals, but in West Africa, the color for funerals is usually white or red. Carter opted for white because she felt like the color red already had significance in representing the Dora Milaje. So I really loved the references that Carter put into these costumes. For example, the Border Tribe is distinguished by the Basutu blankets, and the Merchant Tribe is inspired by the Tuareg, which you can see with their turbans and big silver earrings. Ramonda's white dress here has graphic prints and line work from the Ndebele, and the River Tribe's elder is heavily inspired by the Mursi tribe of Africa, who culturally remove their bottom teeth to insert a lip plate. And even the Midnight Angel's suit has a mask style similar to the masks of Benin or South Africa, where you can see the slanted eye with a round shape. At the same time that we see all these traditional references, Shuri's casual wear is more influenced by high fashion tech wear that we'd see on a runway. It makes sense because she's a woman in STEM and she has a less traditional attitude, stating in the film that she doesn't believe in some cultural ceremonies.
You didn't believe the ancestral plane was real, did you?
No. Key, adjusted your stupid ritual, and for what?
But Carter still made Shuri's outfits speak towards her heritage. In an interview with Vulture for the first movie, Carter talked about using recycled fabrics for Shuri's outfits to fall in line with Wakanda's environmentalist stance. But also for Shuri's new Black Panther suit, there's a familiar Okavango triangle pattern that was used for King T'Challa's suit as well. Carter also worked with emerging women and BIPOC designers to create bespoke apparel and footwear for Shuri, Okoye, and Riri. For Wakanda Forever, the cultural research extended beyond Africa because we're introduced to Namor, who, as I said earlier, is of Mayan descent and is from this civilization called Talocan. And so, needless to say, there are a lot of Mayan references in this film as well. For example, Namor wears a feathered serpent headdress that is reminiscent of Mayan feather headdresses. He also wears jade ear spools, which is something you can see in Aztec and Mayan sculptures and codices. The artist Anthony Francisco, who designed the necklace that Namor wears, wrote in an Instagram caption last November that he looked to Mayan glyphs and architecture for inspiration. Carter also told Pop Sugar that for her research, she used the MayaVase database, which is a unique and extensive archive of Mayan knowledge, resources, history, and art. She and her team also examined Mayan codices, paintings, artifacts, hieroglyphics, figurines, and pottery of Mayan artisans who detailed the meanings and stories in their designs, as well as worked with historians to better understand the language, folklore, and mysticism. A really cool thing that she discovered is that Mayans were using rubber in the 16th century. She says, "They could have used rubber in all kinds of ways, and that was helpful to me underwater. I was not shy about putting silicone into the costumes and just kind of getting that textural feel of this material that is unconventional for what you would think of when you think of the 16th century. Everything you think would be made of some kind of organic matter, but we could use rubber. That was really exciting to me." But speaking of the underwater outfits, one thing I really have to commend Carter on is designing costumes that also look good underwater. And to do that, she had to use weights in some costumes to maintain their shape. She also had to redesign a bunch of the original Black Panther costume designs to make sure that they were water resistant for this movie. For example, the Jabari have a fur pelt that they wear on their back, and Carter had to come up with a version of the fur pelt that would submerge because a real pelt has a layer of skin. In the end, they used synthetic materials that looked real so that the actors, when they swam, these pelts would absorb the water, which let them swim in a more easy fashion. Part of this process was doing tank tests. So divers would put on the costume pieces, the accessories and whatnot, and submerge themselves into these tanks to see how these garments would move when underwater. Carter says of the experience, "We put all kinds of stuff in the water, and sometimes I was pulling out elements of the water from the costume like, OMG, back to the drawing board, but it was an experience of a lifetime." Overall, I think Ruth Carter did an outstanding job. So I would be very happy if Carter won the Oscar for this movie. And yeah, I think she's a force to be reckoned with. Elvis is a biopic by Baz Luhrmann that tells the tale of Presley's making and unmaking, from the desperate poverty of his childhood through his ascent to the kind of fame for which there was no precedent, and his parallel decline into a state of isolation, excess, creative desolation, and addiction. As for what I thought about Elvis, I'll just leave my Letterboxd review here. The costume designer for the film was Catherine Martin. Martin is a 4-time Oscar-winning costume designer and set director. Some of her notable works include Moulin Rouge, The Great Gatsby, and Australia. She was also the production designer of the film and a co-producer for Elvis, and she's married to Baz Luhrmann. For the film, Martin designed more than 90 costumes from scratch in Australia, collaborating with Indiana's B&K Enterprises, which made many of the original Vegas jumpsuits that defined Presley's final decade. For anyone who doesn't know, B&K Enterprises currently holds the rights to all of Bill Bellew's original jumpsuit designs. Bill Bellew designed Elvis Presley's original costumes and personal wardrobe from 1968 until his death in 1977. Martin also commissioned 34 jumpsuits made by Kim and Butch Polston's team, and 10 of these made the final cut in the film. On top of that, Martin and her colleagues had to assemble over 9,000 individual extras outfits for the large concert scenes. And to comply with COVID protocols, there needed to be 1/3 more clothes in stock to allow for disinfecting worn garments at mass fittings. So needless to say, there were a lot of fucking costumes in this movie. To get started, Martin said that Luhrmann had her do a number of visual tasks. So one of these tasks was to create a timeline of every single jumpsuit that Elvis wore in his career and making note of when he wore it and where he wore it and Also, any particular anecdotes that surfaced about any individual jumpsuits. In the final film, as Austin Butler's Elvis starts to become a bit more unhinged, the suits become crazier and crazier. This was a deliberate choice to help aid the story, but it's not historically true. Like all people, Elvis's fashion changed throughout his lifetime. In the 1950s, he was into oversized suits, lace shirts, and the color pink. He had a rock star sensibility, which is something important to convey to audiences. Martin says, nowadays we tend to think of Elvis's style in the 50s as kind of classic and not confrontational in any way whatsoever. So it was about finding the historical references, but reinterpreting those clothes to emphasize that sexuality. We leaned into things like the lace shirt. He would wear them tied up at the midriff, and that was a specific choice on Elvis's part. He wasn't scared of wearing eyeliner or dyeing his hair to create a stage persona, even though off stage he was incredibly sensitive, shy, and had stage fright all his life. The particular outfits that Martin chose for him to wear in certain scenes made the story easier to follow and easier to understand from a 21st century perspective. Martin notes another detail they added. Elvis would only button the bottom button. Typically, the suits had 2 buttons and men would do up the top button. But by only doing the very bottom button, it kind of liberated all the movement across the chest, which meant Elvis could do all those kinds of incredible shoulder moves. In real life, Elvis's mom was always very supportive of his fashion sense, and in the movie, they allude to how she was actually one of Elvis's fashion inspirations. In the scene following Elvis's mother's death, when he sits in her closet, you see the connection between his lace shirts and her lace dresses. One of the most iconic outfits featured is this pink suit that he wears at the Louisiana hayride in 1954. It's completely fabricated. Elvis never wore this, but obviously it was inspired by other things he wore in the 50s, such as Hollywood jackets and black and white shoes. This is something that he totally could have purchased from the Lansky brothers. The real Elvis was a major fan of the Lansky brothers, which is an influence of all of the 1950s outfits that they created for the movie. The Lansky brothers is a clothier based in downtown Memphis, and throughout the 20th century, they championed a countercultural style that was especially popular among Black musicians, another group of people that Elvis was heavily inspired by. In the 1960s, Elvis goes into the army and is reformed into a kind of slick 60s movie star. In 1968, he breaks out in the 68 special, and you see a reinterpretation of his black leather jacket and pants look. Martin says of the look, it was a watershed moment because we realized that we just made a carbon copy of the suit and it became caricatured. So we needed to find a synergy between Austin's physicality and his interpretation of Elvis, a balance between historical reproduction and the actor's physiognomy. So what they ended up doing was adjusting the Napoleonic collar, the length of the jacket, and the placement of the pockets to all better match Austin's proportions. Some of the costumes also had different versions. For example, Butler had versions of the same costume with a baggier knee for kneeling on the ground and a pristine version for standing in place. He also had a pair of pants that were specifically tailored to make his ass look really good. Priscilla Presley also has a good number of looks in this movie. Her wedding dress in particular was made in-house by Martin's team, who examined hundreds of photos to recreate it. Martin says Priscilla wears quite a lot of pants in this movie, and particularly towards the end when she's about to leave him. It's kind of symbolic of her walking into the future and taking control of her life. Miuccio Prada actually collaborated with the costume team for some of Priscilla's outfits, and she also collaborated with them on a burgundy suit for Elvis. As you can see, a few Priscilla's outfits incorporate prints from Prada's spring 1996 collection. Overall, I think Elvis had really good costume design. I wouldn't be enraged if it won the Oscar, but I guess like the thing that pulls me more towards Black Panther is that all of Elvis's costumes were basically like recreations of what he actually wore. Like there wasn't as much innovation in terms of design. So I just think as a project, Black Panther was more ambitious than Elvis. Everything Everywhere All at Once is an absurdist sci-fi film that follows Chinese-American business owner Evelyn Kwan Wang as she navigates complications both in her home universe and throughout the multiverse, which she must travel to save it from an alternate version of her daughter. If that makes no sense, you'll just have to watch it, please. I never want to explain what a multiverse is ever in my life. So I love this movie. It's my favorite movie on this list. I was very pleasantly surprised when I first watched it. I watched it like when it came out in theaters, And I went into it not knowing anything about it, and I just loved it. And then I watched it again recently once it started getting nominated for a bunch of awards, just to remind myself of how good it was. And yeah, I love this movie. I think it's so funny, it's so emotionally touching. And as an Asian woman myself, like, there are some cultural details that I could relate to that made the experience better. Also, I just need to play this clip of James Hong at the SAG Awards recently.
But back in those days, I have to tell you this, the Good Earth, the leading role was played by these guys with the eyes taped up like this, and they talk like this. And the producer said the Asians were not good enough, and they are not box office. But look at us now, huh?
So the costume designer for the film is Shirley Kurata. She's a newcomer to the movie costume design world, but for years has been a celebrated wardrobe stylist and designer with clients like artists Billie Eilish and Sky Ferreira and brands Kenzo and Rodarte. So let's talk about the costumes. For research, the process of developing contemporary costumes is very different than historical costumes. You don't have to consult with historians or freeze frame 1920s movies. And because of that, I think contemporary costumes tend to get snubbed by a lot of these award shows. But I actually think the work that goes into this movie is very impressive, especially considering EAO is an indie movie with a very limited budget. Kurata told Fashionista, "I knew I didn't have the time or budget to make a lot of looks from scratch, so I overcame those limitations by reworking vintage pieces, borrowing pieces from designers, and customizing existing pieces." For Everything Everywhere All at Once, Kurata's research involved watching a lot of movies, from watching movies suggested by the Daniels, such as Paprika and Holy Motors, to watching Chinese martial arts films, to rewatching futuristic dystopian films like The Fifth Element, The Matrix, and Blade Runner, and rewatching Wong Kar-wai's films. She also said she didn't sketch out anything except for the Alpha Universe jumpers because she wanted the looks to be specific and dystopian, sort of like Mad Max. For those costumes, she took military pieces and then reworked them. A unique challenge for this movie is that the actors play multiple versions of the same character. And so it has to be really clear through the costuming which version is on screen. In the laundromat universe, the couple, Evelyn and Wayman, work in a laundromat, have a depressed daughter, Joy, and live a very mundane, unhappy lifestyle. Their major conflict is that they're dealing with an audit from the IRS. For this universe, Kurata explained, "As a costume designer, I think about where would she shop and where would she get her clothes? Well, she would go to Chinatown." So Kurata found Evelyn's floral button-up, cropped pants, and quilted zipper vest in Los Angeles' Chinatown. Laundromat Evelyn's other notable look is her red punk sweater that she wears for the New Year's scene. The red and gold are obvious color choices to celebrate the Lunar New Year, but the random word punk also adds a sartorial charm. Kurata says, "It's funny because a lot of products from Asia, sometimes there's a word on it and like, why is it there?" Jobu Tupaki, aka Alternate Universe Joy, has the most fun costume changes throughout the entire film, and most of her outfits were a subversion and reclamation of Asian stereotypes. The first time we meet her, she wears a plaid masked costume. The visor element in particular references all the grandmas of Chinatown. But also during pre-pandemic times, and particularly in Asia, Asians have been stereotyped as wearing surgical masks more often than any other group of people, except like doctors and nurses. It's a practice that you do to be respectful to other people. If you know you're sick, you just try to contain that, especially when you're on the subway or when you're in public spaces. Kurata says that they filmed this look before lockdown, so she didn't realize how global masks would become. Jobu Tupaki's preppy golf look is a representation of mother-daughter conflicts. It's the scene when Evelyn first meets the alternate version of her daughter, and this costume exemplifies the perfect, wholesome Asian daughter who excels at sports and everything else. There's also the more obvious references, K-pop Jobu and goth Jobu, which looks based on the gothic Lolita subculture in Japan. Part of Evelyn and Joy's conflict is also that Evelyn is not readily accepting of her daughter's sexuality, and so as the film goes on, Jobu's costuming experiments with elements of femininity and masculinity to nudge at that. She is the manifestation and exaggeration of Laundromat Joy's depression, anxiety, and nihilism. There's even an outfit where she wears a bunch of clothes at once, which the production called jumble jobu. For that outfit, Kurata used pieces from existing costumes as well as just like other random pieces and draped them all together on a mannequin. This outfit is also a love letter to Comme des Garçons runways, a brand founded and made famous by Japanese designer Rei Kawakubo. The silliest universe is the hot dog universe, where Evelyn and Deirdre are lovers with hot dog fingers. For this universe, they both dress in neutral-toned pussy bow blouses. The blouses bring a softness and romanticism because this universe is more domestic and sweet. Kurata says, I thought they should be in the colors of a hot dog, just like beiges and a soft pink. The movie star universe is heavily inspired by Wong Kar-wai, and you can definitely see the blurring techniques that the Daniels used to capture his moody romantic style. The universe is also heavily based on Michelle Yeoh's actual life, so they used clips of the real Michelle on red carpets to show Evelyn's career trajectory. But the most popular look from this movie is arguably the Bagel Universe outfit that Joby wears, a futuristic all-white outfit with a pearl-embellished bodice and an Elizabethan ruff collar. Kurata says, I thought pearls would be nice and I just wanted something a little bit clean and regal, but in this sci-fi way. So this might be a surprise to you all, but I actually think that if I was voting in the Academy, I would award the Best Costume Design Award to Everything Everywhere All at Once. And in my defense, I posted a poll and most of you agree also. And it's just so wonderful seeing a contemporary film get accolades for costume design. I also just think that Everything Everywhere All at Once, it's like the most interesting, most unique film nominated this entire season. So I do hope it wins as many awards as possible because I think it's really important to award indie productions who tend to take more risks, who are stretching smaller budgets, and in this case, who are actually generally more creative, more unique, more interesting than anything that we've seen so far in Hollywood. The last movie on our list is Mrs. Harris Goes to Paris, the fourth screen adaptation to be based on the Paul Gallico 1958 novella Flowers for Mrs. Harris. In the movie, Ada Harris, a working-class cleaning lady in 1950s London, who, after seeing a Christian Dior dress at a client's house, goes to Paris determined to buy one herself. I feel like not many people watched this movie, but I did, and it was cute, and it had our favorite actor in the supporting cast, Gabrielle from Emily in Paris. I'm just kidding. All respect to Lucas Bravo. Yeah, I don't really have anything to say. This movie felt like very much a fluff movie. It was cute. It was family friendly. There were low stakes. It's easy to watch. I think I watched it while I was sick, so it's a good like watching while sick movie. It's not phenomenal. It's not groundbreaking, but I don't think it's trying to be. And yeah, we can appreciate it for what it is. The costume designer for the film is Jenny Beavan, who is a 3-time Academy Award winner, having won for A Room with a View, Mad Max Fury Road, and Cruella, which I don't want to talk about, but you can see my thoughts on Cruella in a previous video. But clearly, Jenny has got the range because those 3 movies are completely different movies. So let's talk about the costumes for Mrs. Harris. For the scenes in London, Beavan put Ada in patterned dresses, floral blouses, and bright aprons over plaid skirts. Most of them were original vintage from the 1940s. Beavan went for the trope of dressing Ada in older, more like outdated clothing because she is working class in the mid-20th century, so Shein does not exist, thank God. Her reality is probably that she mends and rewears clothes more often than she buys new. I also just think that from a narrative point of view, this is great because it shows how Ada takes buying something very seriously, and it's something that she doesn't really do for herself. So it really is like the biggest treat yourself moment for her to decide on a Christian Dior gown. During Ada's time in Paris, she stays with Dior accountant Andre while she waits for her dress to be made. Andre lives with his sister, who is out of town conveniently, and so offers for Ada to borrow her clothes while she's staying there. Beavan says, "We called the sister Sandrine and decided she was bookish. Her clothes are mostly single block colors, simple but chic, and very different from the London florals. When we dressed Leslie up and put Sandrine's shoes and lighter stockings on her, she just looked like someone dressed as a chic French person. So we kept Ada's thicker stockings and clumpier shoes. Even if you can't see them, they give that grounding." The exciting part about the costume design for me were the Dior recreations. Bevan estimates the team precisely replicated 16 original looks from a bridal finale gown, a couture requisite, to chic day dresses and glamorous evening gowns. The first Dior dress that Ada sees in the closet of one of her clients is called Ravissante, which was a dress that was inspired by the Miss Dior, a mini dress that was featured in the house's Spring-Summer 1949 show. It's never actually worn by anyone in the movie and therefore needed to stand out by just being on a hanger. Bevan says of the dress, the pastel colors were specifically chosen so an older woman would love it. There's that heavenly moment when Ada in double floral holds it up and it's triple floral, and it makes sense of why she would fall in love with it. It's a running theme that Mrs. Harris loves flowers because they remind her of her husband who passed away during World War II. So with that in mind, like, the Ravissante just had to be a big floral moment. When she holds the dress up, the audience is invited to share her vision of what it would be like to wear it. So to do her research, Vivian actually went to the Dior Heritage Archives, which I went to last September and got to talk to Madame Swazi. And yeah, it's kind of funny just like reading this because I was like, wow, I actually experienced this. So I know what she's talking about when she is talking about all the different like fabric samples and sketches that she got to leaf through. Yeah, that was just really cool to read about. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is when Ada attends the Dior fashion show. The show collection includes the 5 direct copies of dresses from the original 1957 show and 5 outfits lent from Dior's Heritage collection, including the famous Dior bar suit. So, Temptation and Venus are the 2 gowns that catch Ada's eye during the fashion show. Temptation is a red gown inspired by Dior's Diablotine. Bevan added a bolero to give more drama to the reveal of the neckline. Venus is the green dress and was partly inspired by a pearlescent gown also called Miss Dior. Bevan says Mrs. Harris had to fall for the 2 dresses, so they had to have color. One of the dresses I had seen in the archives, which was from the 1950s, was a red dress with the most amazing sequins. I believe that all of them were hand-sewn over the entire dress. In creating Mrs. Harris's first choice, Temptation, we made it crimson red, but hand-sewn sequins were beyond our capabilities. I got a sample from the north of England that I thought would work. It would have the feel of Dior and was the closest we could come to recreating this particular dress I'd seen in Paris. The green dress, Venus, which was her second choice, had to look good on her, but also had to look good on Rose Williams and be able to burn. The funny thing is that I chose a toile because I assumed it would flame up, but when it came to igniting, it would not burn. The silk burned, but not the toile. So yeah, at the end of the film, spoiler alert, Ada does lend her dress to one of her clients, Pamela, to wear, and while Pamela wears it, she accidentally catches on fire, and the dress is completely destroyed. And because this movie is PG and wholesome, nothing happens to Pamela, but yeah. The dress, sad. The most unrealistic part about this movie is that the dress can fit Pamela and Ada Harris because they do have different proportions from what it looks like, but also Ada was in Paris for a week because the dress was custom made to her exact measurements. So it's highly unrealistic that it would look also as good on Pamela as it would on Ada. And actually, I was right because after looking into it, the costume team made 3 copies of Venus, one of which fit Rose Williams' measurements, who is the actress who plays Pamela. My final thoughts are, sure, like the costumes for this movie are nice and I have like a personal fondness for Dior, and I do think Jenny Beavan is good at her job, like hence all the awards that she's racked up over her career. But when you compare it to the other movies, it like falls into the Elvis trap again, where a good number of the costumes were recreations, and also there were just not as many costumes. Like the scale of it wasn't as big compared to the other movies. I just think like this particular movie had these limitations, and that's just the nature of the movie. As I said before, I'm not saying Jenny Beavan is not a good costume designer or that she doesn't have the skill set to do anything else. I just don't think this movie in particular stands out compared to some of the other nominees. So this is the end of the video. Let me know what your thoughts are on the costume design. I'll see you all next time. Let me know if you would want to see this again, this format again next year also. Okay, bye!